Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Brian Connor. I am the Director of JD Edwards Security for ERP Suites. My background, I've been in the JDE space for, I think, 27, 28 years now, quite a while. It's been a fantastic career, and we look forward to sharing a lot of information and insights on JDE Security with you today. Linda?
Hey, Brian. My name is Linda Nelson. My background is audit, about 25 years in audit and compliance prior to joining All Out. And I was on the customer side for a while. I spent about 20 years doing JD Edwards implementations, specifically from the control, financial, and security perspective. So hopefully some of the things you'll hear me add to Brian's content are some of the experiences I've had in the implementation stage or making sure that I'm managing risk. So sounds like we should have a pretty good session today, Brian. I look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you, Linda. Look forward to it as well. Linda and I have done webinars before, and it's fantastic having an auditor. You don't often hear IT and security people say they like having an auditor involved, but I do because it brings a lot of great business insights into what we're looking at and giving a different perspective on what we're talking about. All right, so let's get into our agenda for today. So we're going to talk about a few different things. So one of them is talking about the benefits of an ongoing security assessment. What is it and what does it entail and why is it a good idea to do that frequently? Not necessarily, not every 5 years, not every quarter, but on a regular periodic basis. We're going to talk about some tools to automate testing and change control in your security environment. And we're going to wrap up with some opportunities to jumpstart your security and compliance adoption roadmap. All right, so what are the benefits of an ongoing security assessment? Well, first we need to get into what is a security assessment. So if you go and look, you'll see a ton of different definitions out there on the interwebs of what is a security assessment. Most of them are going to be focused on a cyber or infrastructure security, but a lot of the same things apply to your JD Edwards environment as well. So it is a process to identify, assess, and manage the risks that you may or may not have within your system. So do you know what security is in place? And is it following your standards and design? Is the security effective or you have conflicting settings and you're having to band-aid security to get things working the way you want them to work? And then what risks are involved and what are you doing to manage those risks? So we look at what security is in place. So it's not just looking at your application and action security, though that is a part of it, but Oracle is thankfully continually introducing new features on the security front for the Enterprise One product set. So are you taking advantage of some of these new security features? We have a screenshot example here of that's been out there for a while, but long username and long password enablement. The old 10 character limit is gone by the wayside. We now have long usernames that allow you to integrate with Active Directory, single sign-on, many different products that allow you to have better control over how users are able to log in, which makes it harder for people to guess. Same thing with passwords. You're no longer limited to those really short passwords, so you can get up to, I think, Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, 40 characters for your password.
Yeah, if you're that kind of crazy, but absolutely 40. And Brian, you're right. There's so much. You and I have been doing this security stuff for
A long
longer
time.
than we want to admit sometimes. But there's always new features and functionality and staying on top of that and understanding what your organization could be benefiting from outside of, like you said, that standard application and action code is truly one of those things that the assessment can bring into play because it's hard to stay on top of everything new that's going on and what's available and what would work for your organization.
Absolutely, great points. And a counterpoint to that, or not a counterpoint, but in addition, is a great way to stay on top of all of that is to go to your user groups and your Quest conferences. So if you have a local user group where you are, or going to Blueprint or In Focus, where you've got subject matter experts from Oracle as well as other customers that are always happy to share their experience and adoption of some of these new security features. So
Yeah,
a
even
plug
from
for all of the Quest things.
yeah, even from Blueprint, I did a security roundtable that was all new features in 9.2, all new security features in 9.2, release 22 and release 23, and what some of the business benefits and options might be for those. So yeah, some of that content's out on the Quest site as well.
And that was a full hour session, and we didn't get as in depth on everything as we wanted as well. So definitely one of the things we look at is the new features. Are you adopting them, and how are they being adopted? Are you using them the best possible way? The next thing we look at is older features that may not be fully implemented. So I know we've highlighted the long username and passwords. It's not necessarily it's newer, but it's been out there for a while.
Yeah.
The example I like to use that I see frequently is the old processing option security. So they made an update to that in tools release 8.98.4.2. So it's a long time ago, but a lot of companies aren't taking advantage of the power that you have with processing option security to control your data selection. There's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff you can do with that that gives you the business granular control over what users can do when they're running all those UBEs.
Even things like HyperExit security. Brian and I both always recommend keeping it simple. You don't want to add every layer of every feature of everything. You'll make your security unsustainable. However, there are specific areas. HyperExit security, if you have access to do a cycle count, you have access to both update it and approve it unless you use HyperExit security in place to do that. Some really common functionality that in very specific places, those extra security functionalities can really manage risk.
Very selective, absolutely. And then the last thing for what security is in place is looking for unexpected access. Sometimes changing business requirements necessitate a change in access controls. Roles sometimes grow to include unexpected programs or UBEs that were added as a one-off to get past a particular issue, and then they never get taken out. And 5 years later, nobody knows why that access is still in that particular role. So is the security effective? Again, we're looking at business requirements changing. Maybe you've gone from a distributed financials model to a shared services. A lot of companies are consolidating and pulling financials from all of the different branch plants and locations into a single location. That can result in needing to change the access levels for a lot of different people. So do you have a change in business requirements? Responsiveness to business needs. Are you able to fulfill a request in a timely manner, or is it taking days or weeks with a lot of back and forth to be able to answer the business and get them the access that they need so that they can continue doing the business?
Without an access surprise, the worst thing you want is to give somebody something new and take away things that they thought they could do before. So yeah.
Absolutely. And then managing risks. So one of the big things is, are changes to access being tested? Are you validating that the change is having the intended effect? And to Linda's point, not taking away things that you don't want to take away. So many times when you're granting access, perfect example, Linda said with the cycle count. They need to be able to open the application. There's form and row access that are frequently granted with it, but if you're doing the cycle count, you don't necessarily want to approve the cycle count. You want somebody else to verify that. So make sure that the risks are being managed. Are all of the changes known? Are you able to trace the changes to a change request, or do you have things that are happening in your system that nobody really knew what it is and why it was there? Those one-off changes we talked about before. And then are there gaps between what is expected and what is in place? Those temporary emergency fixes, did they get backed out or are they still sitting there?
And really, taking your security efforts and focusing them on managing risks can really help save you time as well as ensuring that your organization is protected. So sometimes even looking at the assessment of, do you have layers of security that are unnecessary because they really aren't managing the real risk to your organization and therefore are just costing you time and effort.
Absolutely. Or have they been superseded with new functionality? I see frequently a lot of companies have column security to protect information in the address book, but the address book data privacy supersedes that and provides a much better solution to achieve the same thing.
Absolutely.
So why do you want to do an assessment more frequently? You need to understand your current security posture. Things change over time. So having an independent third party come in and take a look at it and let you know, am I where I think I am, right? And being able to prioritize findings and things that are there. So making the recommendations, but not just recommending things, being able to prioritize and tell you this is important. The other one, it would be a nice to have, but it's not as critical as some of these other things. But it's also nice to have for your business and for your team to understand what is working well. You can focus your efforts where they will have a greater impact because you're not spending time on those low impact, low value changes that everybody thinks have a greater impact than they really do.
Yeah, and realistically, from an audit perspective, one of the benefits of of an assessment to me was always, I don't want an audit surprise. I don't want somebody throwing me something at me that I haven't thought of. And it's so frequent that we get so busy processing our day-to-day activities and are used to doing the things that we're familiar with that a second set of eyes is never a bad thing. So,
Absolutely. Thanks, Linda. I know for myself, if I'm proofreading a paper, I know in my head what I think I'm saying, but when somebody else comes in and they look at it and they ask me questions, is it, oh, that isn't at all what I said in that paragraph. So having an independent review come back and let me know, am I correct with what I'm doing? And I think, when I was running JDE for companies, I was always welcoming of having an internal auditor come in and double check everything that I was doing, um, because they have a different set of eyes and they look at things differently. And so it's nice to have somebody look at and question and be able to understand what's happening and why. I realize I'm probably unique in that I welcomed auditors into the environment, but
when I was not on the auditor side, I was on the customer side, I was the same. I would, often use the auditors to draw attention to what needed some attention. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
All right, so that's the assessment piece. We're going to cover some of the things that we think are going to come out of the assessment piece in what we're talking about next, which is the tools to automate the testing and change control to manage your risk. Because really, all that comes down to when you apply security in JD Edwards, you're looking to manage your risk.
Yeah, and all of that is going to tie back to whether it's coming out of an assessment, coming out of your identified needs, or just supporting your ongoing operations.
Absolutely. So we're going to cover 6 things here. So from production impact to your audit trail. So these are the areas that we see most frequently from an assessment side, from doing security project and support side, as well as I think from Linda's side, from an audit area of what matters and what are people looking at. So our first one, our challenge is how do you manage changes to users and roles? Because obviously the way JD Edwards is out of the box, you have a single set of tables to manage your security and roles for all of your users. So changes to security and role assignments can impact production immediately. Um,
I remember a time I was doing working at a production organization and get a call on Monday morning at 5 a.m. that 6 of the plants, nobody on the production floor can sign in because somebody thought they made a change that was needed.
Absolutely. Um, and so if you're working around that, a lot of times I see companies that they have a set of DV roles and a set of production roles. So now you've introduced tracking those changes. So you've made changes to the dev roles. Are you really effectively tracking what changes you're doing to the dev roles versus what's being done to the production roles? And are your auditors happy with having different role names? I've come across multiple auditors that are not happy, well, but they don't have the same roles in development as they do in production. So now I have to prove that they're the same thing, which results in a lot of extra effort on the auditor's part to prove that the roles match and the access matches between the environments.
And you made a good point there, Brian. When you are maintaining things in two ways, whether it's two sets of roles, whether it's two sets of security tables, anytime you're, maintaining stuff in a external environment, anytime you do that, whether it's from an audit perspective or just a managing access perspective for managers, you've really got to be able to show that what you're testing, what you're signing off on is really what's impacting your production environment. And your auditors absolutely will show that you bear that burden of proof. But it even goes if you're not a public company, it's every bit as important of understanding what's really happening to your production security.
Absolutely. So there's your challenge. So what do you do about it? So having a good, solid change review and approval process. Um, I've had several companies, again, and we do this internally for ourselves as well as for our clients, use a tracking system like ServiceNow or Remedy, whatever the tracking system of your choice is, to document the request details, the approver, have all of that documented in a ITIL-based system. So when you have that combined with information that you can pull out of security history, you can show changes for a period have been reviewed, approved between development and production. It does require some manual processing to match up the changes with a request out of your ticketing system, but it does allow you, if you to track those things together. So a process, I think definitely that if you don't have in place, you should to make sure that the changes are being reviewed and approved and understood before they're being made. Um, Another thing that is becoming more and more common now is splitting your tables. So with a single security table, if I'm logged into Dev and I add a program to my voucher entry role, anybody who has that role in production gets that new access almost immediately. If I split the tables, now when I make that change in development, I'm only affecting that role in development, not having different roles, the same role, non-production security table versus a production security table. Now we have the luxury of being able to test and validate and have the users log into non-production and verify that this change is doing what they expected it to do. So along with the role assignment in your tracking system, we've got
So so you really sorry, you really want to look at this from, like Brian was saying, what is your request process? Make sure you document this is the process that we're using, and then you adhere to that process. Any documentation that you need to show evidence of the approvals of the way the request process works. However, that access change is happening. So you have your change request, you've got your change approval, and then your change implementation. Whether that is manually doing it in production automating the way that goes to production. If you want to go ahead and click, Brian, to finish filling the slide. One more, I believe. There you go. So, so you can go ahead and there's tools. I mean, we've got tools. There's other tools in place where you can have a workflow around that, where you can capture the approvals. ServiceNow does it. If you do have those split tables, how are you moving those into production? If it's a manual update, then you've got to go ahead and make sure that you're capturing evidence to assure yourself and any auditors that what you're putting into production matches, or wherever you can automate that. It's going to be a much stronger control to have an automated promotion or an automated update versus a manual update that you've got to put a detective control in place that says, did I do it right? Last time I checked, we're human. We get phone calls in the middle of changes. So how do you make sure that what you've done is appropriate? And even things like, do you have particular roles that you want to restrict access to? I never want somebody to get the CNC admin role without somebody in IT approving it. So again, target your risk, look for those things that are most important, and put processes in place to be able to document, capture that evidence, and make it auditable for yourself or auditors. Go ahead, Brian.
Absolutely. And that's really helpful. If you take auditors out of the equation, your business comes back to you and says, why did you give so-and-so this access, right? And being able to go back and show when and why and who approved that access being assigned to that user. That's one of the more frequent things, I think, and having that process gives you the ability to go back and provide evidence to that.
Even in simple situations, I mean, I was in an environment where we had a junior, a senior, and the third, all with access. And we kept different people were doing security on first shift and second shift. Those individuals worked on first shift and second shift. And every time one of them would come to work, their security was wrong because we didn't realize there were 3 people involved. We thought there were 2 people involved. We kept changing the one guy's security, and 2 people were actually using it because they happened to have the same name, and we didn't understand it was another body. And so we kept changing their security. And if we'd had that approval flow and realized different managers were requesting this access, we could have saved ourselves a couple of days of going back and forth and changing these 2 poor guys' security and realized we needed another user ID.
Yep, that's always fun. So challenge number 2, did the change that we just made cause a conflict? As Linda said before, whether you are a public or private company, it is really, well, if you're public, it's a requirement, but if you're a private company, it's, I think, good business practice to utilize the same controls and approaches to compliance that you would use if you were a public company. So did it cause a conflict? It's very difficult for a security administrator to be aware of all of the compliance rules that you have in your system. So when a change is made, it can create this conflict that creates the opportunity for fraud. Unfortunately, fraud is a fact of life for business. One interesting statistic that I found in the latest ACFE report to the nations. ACFE is the Association for Certified Fraud Examiners. So they every year release a very detailed report. But what they found in their investigation for their latest report is that 62% of the fraud was committed by managers, directors, or executives. The other point is that fraud committed at this level of the company involves higher dollar amounts than that committed at the employee or staff level. So making a change, even if it's for a senior person in the organization, if it causes a conflict and opens up the opportunity for fraud, this is something that really should be in the forefront of your mind.
You made a good point there when you said, does it create a conflict? And you made the comment about, adherence with your rules. A conflict could be a lot of things. It could be you're giving somebody segregation of duties. It could be just simply, we've got an internal rule that nobody creates employee records except HR. Well, if somebody is able to do that, that's outside of HR, that's a conflict with what your control definition is, or what your the way you want to manage your business, and having visibility to that and understanding that, and it showing that you're adhering to that can be important and not hard to do.
Absolutely. So what do you do? How do you solve the issue of making a change and understanding, did it cause a conflict? So compliance and critical access review. So the 2 points there, compliance and critical access. So segregation of duties versus, like Linda said, access to create employee records. So it may not be a segregation of duties violation, but it's a critical access violation that shouldn't have been granted. So when changes in a role or role assignments are made, they need to be validated against your current control framework. And again, ideally, this should be done in development before the changes are made in production, because once it's in production, it's your live transactional data and things can happen that you may not want to have happen. And if compliance issues are present, you need to be able to have effective mitigations in place and make sure that the people that have these compliance violations know what those mitigations are if it requires participation on their side.
Yeah, everybody has mitigating controls in place. It's just a matter of, are you, do you have visibility? Do you understand whether it's managing risk, or if you need to do it with security?
Right. I think that's one of the key factors in reducing the risk of fraud, including the duration of the fraud and the amount of money lost, is frequent testing of controls. Make sure that, if you've put in a control that says, I'm going to print out all of my journal entries and they're going to be reviewed and signed off by a manager, you need to test it. And are they actually doing that?
Yeah, even things like all security changes are approved by somebody in the business. How do you check for that? And I'll show you an idea later that's an easy way to check for that type of stuff. But yeah,
Right. So when you're looking for compliance, what are you looking for? What are your controls and what are your segregation of duties violations, right?
yeah. And this is just an example, the types of things you want to look at when you're looking at, does somebody have the ability to set up a vendor master? Does somebody have the ability to, maybe both set up a vendor master and do voucher entry? It's, who is the person? In this case, Amanda's got a couple of different security roles, and that's giving her access to a variety of programs that allow her to enter or update a voucher, as well as the ability to create a vendor master maintenance, which means they can go ahead, create a vendor, enter a voucher, and generate a payment for that may be fraudulent. That's probably one of the common areas that over the years we've found fraudulent activity from a compliance perspective. So getting visibility to that and making sure you have a monitoring technique, whether you're going to look at, do I have conflicts? Do I have access issues? Are you going to look at it maybe high risk quarterly, other things once a year? Just defining what that monitoring approach is going to be, and how is it that you're going to look at that. In this case, it's just on a report, but what's going to work for your organization?
Absolutely. All right. So challenge number 3 is doing rework to resolve the issue. So I know this happens frequently. Um, the change made does not solve the issue, right? The requested changes sometimes are unclear or incomplete. Users might not be aware that what they're asking for, they're looking for a program or a UBE, that there are form and row exits that they need access to, or there are called UBEs that need to also be granted with the parent UBE in order for it to work. Not having all of that required access can result in a failed transaction that requires additional time and effort to clean up before you try it again. And that can end up in data integrity issues in the system. Um,
Traditionally, the number one reason for accounting integrity issues, um, your balances don't match the transactional detail, and that is is security issues. That is the number one cause of accounting, of the GA accounting integrity issues.
And that's, I know I've talked to several clients that would like to have data security, row security in place, but because of issues they've had in the past, they are unwilling to implement data security because of past issues and not knowing how to resolve some of those past issues to make sure that they don't have integrity issues. The other thing is the back and forth with the business for changes already completed in production causes a lot of stress both on your business users and on your support users, and it might be impacting the ability to get of users to get their jobs done. So it becomes a firefighting exercise, right? To figure out what needs to be done, just get it fixed so that we can get product off the dock and onto the UPS truck, right?
And that's the easiest time to introduce unexpected security access to your environment, because you're just quickly trying to do whatever they need to get them able to perform a transaction.
Yep, absolutely. Just get it done. We have to ship the product. All right, so rework to resolve the issue. So the biggest factor I think in this is getting complete testing of the required change before moving it to production. Now, whether that is a DV role to a PD role or a dev security table to a production security table, completely testing it, making
Yeah.
sure that, I'm sorry, Linda.
No, I was going to say, or even just understanding, are you going to remove security from somebody through visibility with reporting, whatever it is that you need to do?
Yes, absolutely. Um, testing is not being done under the pressure of production transactions. And then you know that what you're doing in non-production has been tested and validated and it works end to end. The old adage of measure twice, cut once definitely applies to security, maybe even more so because the impact in production can be severe. So, you know, make sure that you're not introducing unintended consequences or changes in production. Test in non-production, and it's not just open up the screen and say, yep, I see it, I see the plus button. No, click the plus button, complete the transaction. Does it go all the way through? Does it tie into the financials? Complete testing all the way is really the only way to make sure that you have an accurate and correct and complete security change done.
I would agree completely. So when you start looking at that and you want to understand, this control of what's happening in your production environment and this risk management really goes beyond a request and approval. You want to go ahead and make sure that as you go through this and as you're determining what steps you're going to take, that again, you're focusing on where your risk is. You can't manage everything. So understand where your true risk is, whether you're looking at segregation of duties. Do you want to be able to flag those things where somebody can create fraudulent transactions ahead of time? Go ahead. And you want to understand, do I have that CNC admin role I want to control? Who's responsible? One of the toughest things I've run into is making sure that you really have defined who owns that authorization within your organization. And if you're doing it on the fly when you're trying to get a change into production, it can be a lot more disruptive than if you've defined that business process ahead of time, understand who's there, and making sure you have a backup. Because invariably, when you're trying to order T-shirts for your company party, your HR manager is going to be on vacation. So who's their backup? Make sure you've got somebody in place. And whether that's testing and validating security changes, defining where your risk is, um, promoting those changes into production and ensuring what gets to production is really what you want to be there, have those defined processes, or use a tool that can support you in automating those controls.
Absolutely. Invariably, when you don't have that process defined, the person that knows what changes are needed is unavailable, and you have somebody who looks at it and just says, Well, I'm sure they would have approved it. Just give them access to it. We'll talk to them tomorrow.
Yeah, one of the big things in defining those backups is ensuring that they're appropriately trained for what you need them to do.
Yep, absolutely. All right, challenge number 4, business timelines. I'm sure everybody has different timelines and different times of the month, year, quarter when things can go into production. If you're in finance, month end, quarter end, year end are no-nos for any changes being made. Um, if you're at month end or maybe mid-month when you're doing a physical inventory, maybe you have a special promo that ends at a certain time. So your warehouse guys have a blackout date where you can't make changes to anything that they're doing, right? So business constraints for changes are a fact of life. So you can't always move everything up at the same time. Along with those timelines again, and this is kind of a common theme, is tracking of approvals and being able to promote those changes, whether it's between security tables or between roles of what changed, and then not allowing additional changes until the first ones are in production. It can become a logistical nightmare. You can have the wrong changes moved up or incomplete changes being moved up to production.
Yeah. So how do you get visibility? What do you do with that?
Great question, Linda. So one of the things you want to do is roll out of approved and tested changes only. Um, to do this, you need a robust change management and tracking system in place. Security history can help with some of it, but it's not going to be 100%. We'll go back to, I really like ServiceNow because they've got some great processes baked in. You can customize them for the approved and tested changes so you know exactly what is allowed to go to production, when it's allowed to go, and you've got evidence of somebody having um, tested it and in the ticket system, as well as somebody in the system as well having approved that it's ready to go. So being able to roll out only certain changes and having the tracking and history to know what you're moving and when you're moving is really important.
So when you start taking a look at that, what is it that you need to pay attention to and have awareness to? And this is our our system, but it's a set of examples. Things like, has the security changed, or has just role assignments changed? That validation flag is things like, has it been, does it control, does it, do these changes involve control? Yeah, one more try. Do these changes involved controlled roles? Am I trying to give somebody CNC admin? Has it been approved or is it waiting for approval? Is there um, is there an approval flag or an approval that's been a status that's been tracked on the role assignment? Um, Things like in the reason code on the right, that column of reason codes. Is it a job change? Is it vacation coverage? If it's vacation coverage, it probably should have a requested expiration date. So getting visibility to things like that. Has somebody authorized this change? And if it was, who was it? And was there, as you can see on Barry, I did an authorization on a security role that's supported by a ServiceNow ticket, and I can go ahead and document it right there. So who's the approver list? What is the approval or the area of the organization that's responsible for approving this? So what what is it that you need to have visibility to and to manage within that timeline to be successful? Go ahead and click. Some of the other things you can look at are even a more simple view. In this case, I just went ahead and said, I really just want to see what the role is, who's getting it, why are they getting it, has it been approved, and over on the right hand side, who's making this change, who's gone through this. So depending upon the complexity of the information that you want to track or that your business process supports, you may have different things that you want to look at. Even on the O4 tax setup for Ariadne, you can see there's an attachment. I got an email from Mary or from Monica, and I went ahead and included it in the system. So really tracking what it is that you want visibility to assure that this security change is ready to move into production, doesn't introduce risk, or gives you quick visibility to things like, do all my vacation coverage changes have an expiration date, to really make your review process and your, yep, it's ready to go, streamlined.
Yep, absolutely. Great information there. Um, Challenge number 5, manual reentry. I know we've touched on this a couple times, but when you're tracking multiple changes and trying to keep track of, did I make it in the dev role, the production role, the dev security table, the production security table, manually entering is prone to mistakes. I know I've done it. I think probably any security administrator has made a mistake and miskeyed something or forgotten, perhaps that exit row security that needed to go up as well. And we only did the application action code security, right? So
Yeah,
even
I got a phone call one time. I deleted all the records in the 950. What can I do?
that's an interesting phone call. So even with a robust change management system, you've got it tracked, you know what's out there. Manually rekeying the changes, we're people. As Linda said, you get a phone call, you get an urgent email, um, whatever it may be, um, people make mistakes. So rekeying those changes into the production access, whether that's the role or the table, you can end up with mistakes that don't get caught in time. So adding the explicit change in the ticketing system helps, but only as long as further updates are well documented. And then when whoever makes the change in production pulls the correct information out of that ticket, because if you've gone back and forth and you've tested it, you might have a few different iterations of what you want done. And the next person on the help desk or security team, that third person goes in and looks at it. Did they get the right changes to put into production or not? So what can you do? What's the resolution for that?
Yeah, anywhere, and Brian, I'm gonna jump in, but I'm gonna be a little quiet after this because we're running a little behind. But anywhere that you can promote or automate the process, you're going to be more controlled than if you're doing it manually. And if you need to do it manually, make sure you have a reconciliation process with an audit trail that you can follow.
Absolutely, and I've done that for multiple clients with a project with multiple security tables where we are validating the changes, the role assignments, the security changes, menu changes between our non-production and our production. So whatever your process is, you need to develop a process to migrate those changes from development to production. If it's the different roles, maybe it's a full copy and replace of the role from dev to production. Whatever it is, you need to have a good, well-documented process with the audit trail and integrity to make sure that things are being done correctly and completely. The role replacement is assuming that all of the changes in that role are ready to move to production as well. So another option, and again, this is an all-out process of security change control approval. I know we saw this top screen earlier with Linda, but I can make a change. I can approve the change, right? The next step that we didn't show you is I can now effectively one button promote that change from development to production, whether it is a change within a role or a change in role assignments. But what I get out of it also is I have an audit trail. I have a PDF that shows here's what I changed and when I changed it, and here's what they had before and here's what they had after. So you've got great evidence that you can show the auditors and track back to a ticket to show exactly what was done. And then you're not rekeying it. So you've eliminated that manual human factors part of it for making a mistake. All right, next challenge is audit trail. Having an auditor on here, and for me, inviting auditors to work in, one of the things you want to have is a really good audit trail. So what are the challenges? You're not leveraging the JD Edwards security capabilities, or you're not using best practices. So activities are tracked in security history. One of the things that security history for JDE doesn't do is showing you what changes were made to a program within a role, right? It also doesn't track things like changes in environment assignments. The new security history does add some additional features, which I think are really, really nice, which tells you which environment somebody's logging into, and it also gives you a source IP address, so it helps you from a cybersecurity perspective of knowing where your users are coming in.
Yeah, it gives you more visibility as to what's happening, but not necessarily what has changed within your security controls.
Absolutely. But it gives you the ability to go back and I have evidence that this role assignment was changed or security
Mhm.
within this role was changed. So you have something to go back to your ServiceNow system again and being able to find evidence of that. And if you don't have evidence of that, then you need to investigate, why was this change made? Who made the change? When did they make the change? And if it resulted in any sort of a conflict, what came out of that? And again, enhanced security history. Again, these are some of the features that Oracle is releasing, the latest updates from them. So if you're not up to date on Oracle, we would definitely recommend getting up to date and staying up to date with a continuous adoption methodology for them. So again, tying the JDE changes to your external request system.
And even getting visibility to, you know, in this case, what is it that you want to audit changes to, whether it's profiles, what access is happening, um, Solution Explorer, if you're relying on your menu task view masking in order to manage who can access what, you want to know when that's being modified. And have you been tracking it all year? Or has somebody gone in and, as is the case with users and roles, you can see somebody just in June turned that tracking off and turned it back on. And so making sure that you know what's being tracked, when it's being tracked. Go ahead and click, please, both from a security perspective and a compliance perspective. If you are relying on your segregation of duties rules or your critical list to give you visibility to those things that are at risk, you want to be aware if somebody is making changes to those as well. So getting that visibility, understanding what's there, go ahead and click. And then being able to report over it and having the information at your fingertips as to, what's changed over a particular period of time. And you'll notice in the audit program trail, sometimes you want to know where those changes are happening. On the first line, you'll see a security change that happened to take place in an all-out screen. On the bottom line, you've got a security change that took place in standard JD Edwards. You want visibility to all of that to really understand what's going on in your environment. So make sure that you're looking at the whole picture. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And I would say, I know tracking the audit information and your compliance information, I had a client years ago, lots of SOD issues, and over the course of a couple of years, they reduced it by 90%. They asked me to come back in and do another audit. It turns out the person who was resolving the conflicts was just turning the rules off.
Yeah, watch that. I often recommend if you're making changes to your rules or your critical list, put a step in place where once a quarter, once a month, once a year, depending on how volatile your environment is, somebody external to the person that's making those changes is reviewing those and making sure that it's appropriate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, all right, so we've gone through all of our challenges and solutions. We wanted to put this up. It's nice to say, here's what we're going to tell you, and then come back in and say, here's what we told you, here's what we've talked about. So,
And this can be a quick checklist for you if you want to take a look at some things that you might want to take advantage of.
absolutely. So not much to add in here.
Mm.
So what are your next steps? So, and I think, Linda, we've got a little bit from you on here.
Yeah, just a couple of slides. So go back one, please.
Back one, I double clicked.
You did. So, we heard a little bit about who ERP suites are, who is all out. we offer you an opportunity to simplify, enhance, and report on your JD security and controls. Um, we offer you market-leading software. We've got best practice project jump starts and education, and expert services from our partners like ERP Suite, so that you can have that assistance to really move forward if you'd like. Go ahead. So what can we do for you? We are an add-on tool set within JD Edwards. You saw a couple of examples. It was just a JD Edwards screen where our information and data resides. It gives you the ability to create and maintain your JD Edwards data, getting full reporting around what access is there, those audit changes. Go ahead. We've got project tool sets if you've got particular projects like security cleanup or security redesign or managing inactive users. And it gives you a chance to configure your environment to really put change control in place, all integrated within your JD Edwards and designed to help you achieve whatever your goals are. So you pick and choose what's most important to you. You don't need to go through the entire project tool set. Go ahead. Some of the features that we use to support this is risk detection and SOD management, getting access reporting, getting the ability to audit where your risk is, really enhancing your user productivity, whether it's your security administrators, your auditors, or your individual users, and getting the noise out of their way so they can really target the productivity things that they want to be doing within JD Edwards. Managing your security, managing your change, and accelerating your projects with some of the things that can support those initiatives for you. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Fantastic. All right. So what opportunities do we have to help you jumpstart your adoption roadmap? And as Linda said, whatever that roadmap might be, everybody has different goals and objectives that they're trying to achieve. So step one, obviously, leverage your trusted partner to gain traction with the business and simplify the work. So from an ERP suites perspective, as I said at the beginning, I've been working in JDE for 28 years. The last 13, maybe 14 years now focused just on JD Edwards security and compliance. Dozens of security projects across all industry verticals and all sizes of company, from 60 user company up to a 2,500 user company. So no job too small or too big, right? We utilize a mature security approach. We've got a proven methodology. We don't work in a vacuum. Security is a business issue with a technical solution. You can't do it by excluding one side or the other. So you can't work in a vacuum, and we definitely do not. So putting your access controls plus your data privacy plus your change control, and that's the key part, that's what makes up your JD Edwards security.
And Brian, you hit nail on the head. As I know, we've got a lot of executives on the webinar, and one of the things, the best pieces of advice I can give you is security. An effective security project that is not doomed for failure needs to involve more than IT. Get your business involved. I mean, I'm an accountant and I manage security in hand with IT, because you really need to be a facilitator of what's going on and ensure that those requirements meet the business needs.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw one more in for you, Linda, is audit as well. Make sure that,
Yes.
that you're paying attention to the things that your external or internal auditors are paying attention to, so that you don't go through a project and then find out, oh, wait, we have to fix what?
Oh
Because you
gosh,
have
yes.
compliance or access issues. So definitely IT, business, and audit. It's a three-legged stool. You need all three. All right, so our 3 steps to jumpstart. So 1, attend the webinar. Everybody here has already done that. Next, book a free consultation. We'll set up time and we'll sit and talk about what your needs are, what's keeping you up at night, and what can be done, whether it's with a tool or not with a tool, what can be done to help make things easier for you and your business. And then lastly, we can set up and conduct a workshop to help define your strategy, custom based on what your business goals are for your system and for your security and compliance needs. All right.
Right,
So
nice
we are
job,
now.
Brian and Linda.
Thank you, Scott.
I was gonna say, just right here before the top of the hour. So if there's any questions, I haven't seen any come through yet, but now's the time. Go to second and see.
And always, if you think of something after the session, I know Brian and Scott and I we're welcome any of the questions that you might have. And hello to some of the folks that we see in the chat saying hello. And we've got some favorite people on here too.
Absolutely.
It
So
must be to you and I, Linda. Sorry, Brian. She said two favorite people.
well, I say I know it's not me. So if not everybody likes to ask questions in webinars, that's fine. If you come up with a question, our contact info is here. Grab a screenshot of this. We're going to answer your questions. I know one of the things, essentially, I saw a clip on LinkedIn last week, and I can't think of his name right at the moment, but the purpose of these things is to give back to our community, to help educate. And so that's what we're trying to do. So if you email me a question, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to answer your question. I know I've had clients from previous companies that find out where I am. They email me. I'm more than happy to answer questions for people. That's what we do. We want to help you with security and make life easier for everybody.
Brian and I both very much work within the community to try to give back and be a part of that community. So we both answer questions. I mean, right, and we answer questions for each other. Brian and I call each other when we run into stuff. So
Absolutely.
connect with the community. It is the greatest place to get answers in the JD Edwards world. There's nothing I've seen like the JD Edwards community.
Absolutely. And I know Scott's probably going to do it, but I'm going to beat him to the punch. We've got our next ERP Suites webinar on Thursday, July 27th. So improve security with your
JSON Web
SSO,
Token.
and it sounds like that's probably a Frank webinar.
That is Frank and Paul talking about security with JSON Web Tokens and single sign-on. So we're going to do that. We just finalized that. So that's next month, Thursday, July 27th.
That you definitely
you can register for it now. Just added it. So go to our events page and you can register for it.
Absolutely. You don't often get Frank doing webinars. So if you don't know Frank Jordan, he wrote the book on JD Edwards performance. So if you get him on there to talk about some of these things, it is a treat indeed.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone. We realize your time is valuable and we appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks all. And we'll see you next month. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Scott.